I was thinking as Rick was talking how blessed we are to have Rick call that back.
Amen.
It's also good to have Carl and Gracie share with us too. We're going to talk about mother's love today. Sometimes if I'm in the series, we don't always have a Mother's Day sermon, but this year we are. And starting next week, I'm going to be preaching 3 Sundays on giving. And I hope that maybe you will use these next 3 weeks of May to maybe try tithing if you aren't doing that. And see if God won't open the doors of heaven and pour out blessings upon you. Matthew 20, starting in verse 20, is where we're at today. This mother we're going to look at today, we don't know her name, but she was an important mother, and you'll see why. Matthew 20, starting in verse 20. Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came to Jesus with her sons, bowing down and making a request of him. That's Jesus. And he said to her, "What do you wish?" She said to him, "Command that in your kingdom these 2 sons of mine may sit one on your right and one on the left." But Jesus answered, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink?" They said to him, "We are able." He said to them, "My cup you shall drink, but to sit on my right and on my left, this is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father." What are mothers? Mothers are many things, aren't they? They're teachers, they're nurses, they're cleaning ladies, they're disciplinarians. Some mothers are gardeners and mowers of lawns, chauffeurs, counselors, psychologists, even doctors sometimes. Mothers are developers of personalities, molders of vocabularies, especially if you say one of those bad words, shapers of attitudes. Mothers do it all. Mothers are soft voices saying, "I love you." And mothers are a link to God. In fact, the child's first impression of God's love probably came from their mother. There's so much more than those things. A column by Irma Bombeck tells of God in the act of creating mothers. I think it's humorous, but yet there's some truth to it. On the day God created mothers, He had already worked long overtime hours. And an angel said to him, "Lord, you sure are spending a lot of time on this one. She is supposed to be completely washable, but not plastic. She is to have 180 moving parts, all of them replaceable. She is to have a kiss that will heal everything from a broken leg to a broken heart. She is to have a lap that disappears whenever she stands up. She is to be able to function on black coffee and leftovers. And she is supposed to have 6 pairs of hands." "It's not the 6 pairs of hands that bother me," said the Lord. "It's the 3 pairs of eyes." "She is supposed to have 1 pair that sees through closed doors, so that whenever she says, 'What are you kids doing in there?' she already knows. She has another pair of eyes in the back of her head to see all the things that she is not supposed to see, but does. And she has that 1 pair that's in the front of her face, on the front of her head, that can look at a child who just goofed up and communicate love and healing with those 2 eyes without even saying a word." The Lord said, "I'm close to creating someone very much like me." It's hard to come up with a model who can heal herself when she is sick, who can feed a family of 6 with 1 pound of hamburger, and who can persuade a 9-year-old to take a shower. Then the angel looked at the model of motherhood a little more closely and said, "She's too soft." "Oh, but she is tough," said the Lord. "You'd be surprised at how much this mother can do." "Can she think?" asked the angel. "Not only can she think," said the Lord, "but she can reason, compromise, and persuade." Then the angel reached over and touched her cheek. "Lord, this one has a leak." "That's not a leak," the Lord said. "That's a tear." "What's a tear for?" the angel said. "Well, it's for joy, it's for sadness, it's for sorrow, it's for disappointment, for pride." "You're a genius," said the angel. The Lord said, "Oh, but I didn't put it there." With all this in mind, maybe we can understand the mother of James and John, sons of Zebedee, a little bit easier. I think Mrs. Zebedee was aware of the teachings of Jesus about his kingdom. She was also, I think, very aware of the fact that her sons, James and John, were important guys as far as Jesus was concerned. And I think she was pretty close to her 2 sons and wanted the very best for them. Wouldn't any mother want the best for her boys or her girls? She, I think, was wanting to get them the best possible places in the kingdom when she could. So when the opportunity presented itself, she took advantage of that and made this request to Jesus. "When you establish your kingdom, please let my sons sit on your right and left hand, those places of authority." That was a request. We might criticize Mrs. Zebedee, we'll call her, since we don't know her real name. But she was being pretty bold in asking Jesus for the seats on his right and his left for her 2 boys. But when you think about it, maybe she wasn't being as so much bold as she was just making the best way for her sons. Jesus didn't grant her request, but at the same time he didn't deny it either. He just said it wasn't up to him to do that. It was up to the Father. What Jesus does is he reminds not only Mrs. Zebedee, but also James and John, who were evidently there, of the cost of those 2 seats. And told her that it was up to the Father to determine who sat there. Think about it. If you were going to be in heaven with Jesus, and I hope you are, where would you want to be? Would you want to be next to him? I think so. So her request isn't really that outlandish, I don't think. Let's look at her request a little bit more in detail here. We know 3 things about Mrs. Zebedee. First of all, we know she prayed for her sons. That's one of the good things we know about her, even though we don't know her name. She came to the Lord praying for her sons, that they might have these 2 special places in the kingdom. When you stop and think about it, I can think of probably very few things that are more important for a mother to do than to pray for her children. I know my mom still prays for me every day. And I appreciate that. I know that many mothers pray. And if you're a mother, you probably pray a lot for your kids that they'll turn out okay. Sometimes mothers pray for their kids because it's necessary. Sometimes they pray because motherhood is definitely not easy. Especially if the mother works, come home and she's still got to work because she's a mother. Sometimes mothers pray just out of the frustration of everything. So I don't think it's too hard for us to understand why Mrs. Zebedee prayed for her boys. Because if you're a mother, you probably pray a lot for your kids. Being a parent is not an easy job. Sometimes you're filled with joy, and at other times there's a great deal of sadness. Sometimes your children make you so proud, you want to just pop your buttons, you know. At other times, you can't find enough handkerchiefs to dry your eyes. I can understand the feelings of this particular mother who had 3 children who was asked this question. If you had it to do all over again, would you have children? And she replied, yes, but not the same ones. Mrs. Zebedee gives us a very valuable example here. She prayed earnestly that her sons would have a special part in the kingdom. And I don't know any mother or any father, really, who wouldn't pray that their children would have a special place in heaven. We need to have that same concern if we're a parent for our kids that Mrs. Zebedee had for her 2 boys. She may have had more children, I don't know. The Bible just talks about the sons of thunder, James and John. But she certainly gives us the example of praying for our children. And we need that same concern for our kids. What good is it if our children are successful, making money, they drive fine automobiles, they live in good neighborhoods, they have good jobs, but they don't know God? What does it matter if they gain the whole world, but they lose their soul? So we need to pray for our children. A second thing I see here from Mrs. Zebedee is that she prayed that her sons would serve. And I think that's a tremendous lesson for parents to teach their kids, to serve. And I think one of the best ways they can teach their kids to serve is if the parents are serving too. Not only did Mrs. Zebedee pray that her children would have a special part in the kingdom, but she prayed that they would be actively involved in serving in that kingdom. You know, the places on the right and left of Jesus were honored spots, but they were spots that were deserved because of what you had done in serving. You know, maybe it's not enough just to be saved. Churches are full of people content to just fill the pew on Sunday morning and do nothing the rest of the week. There are plenty of people willing to sit back and receive the blessings, but seldom do they get involved in doing the real work of the kingdom. I think we could even argue if a person just comes and fills a pew on Sunday, whether they really are a Christian or not. But that's another sermon. Where does the spirit of service begin? Well, I believe it begins at home. I believe it begins in the lives of the parents, because children learn best by example. You can tell them what to do, how to do it, but the best way they learn is when they see mom or dad doing it. And children see their parents praying for them, that makes an impression. When children see their moms and dads being active and involved in church and serving, they get an impression about that too. And they want to, maybe when they get older, they'll want to do that as well. Discipling others is important because that's the way we show others what's important in life, what's important in the church, what's important in God's life. Mrs. Zebedee prayed for her children, and she prayed that they would not only make it to heaven, but she prayed that they would have an active part in serving in the kingdom. We need to follow in her footsteps. Not only praying for our children, but showing them the way, showing them how to serve. To be active and involved in the church. A third thing Mrs. Zebedee shows us is that she had great expectations for her children. When you're working in the kingdom, there are no higher positions than those on the right and the left that are next to the king himself. Those are the best places to be. So that's why she was asking for those places. She wanted the very best for her children, as we all would, I think. She didn't just pray that her children would be in the same room with Jesus. She wanted them to be right next to him. Have that personal contact. We may consider Mrs. Zebedee bold and bashful about how she did this, but I admire her boldness. I admire when a mother or a father goes to bat for their kids. I think for too long some have become content with just doing enough to get by when they could do so much more. For too long they've been content to just sit back and watch, not get involved. That isn't the way it's supposed to work. It's time for some of us to take our positions on the right and the left of Jesus seriously. To become servants in the church. Become leaders in the church. Set an example for others in the church. Making sure that the message of Christ goes out to the whole world. It's time for us to strive for excellence and to expect more from one another. Even as Mrs. Zebedee expected great things for her kids. The Lord calls us to be his disciples. And he calls us to be effective servants and laborers in the kingdom. But some of us have dropped the ball. Some of us aren't doing all we could do. Some of us are doing more than what we could do or should do. You remember Emma Bombeck? Emma had a saying about God creating mothers. This was it. I am close to creating something very much like myself. Remember that in her story? I suppose that's why today's special, because a mother is a good picture of the love of God. And she's probably the closest example that we have of what God's love is really all about. Now, she's not perfect like God's love is, but she gives us a picture of what that perfect love from God is. It's a love that goes through the valley of the shadow of death sometimes. It's a love that sacrifices. It's a love that gives so that others can have. And it's a love that would even dare to lay down its own life for its offspring. This is motherhood. Mothers, this day is for you. May God bless each and every one of you. May you enjoy this day in many different ways. And I pray that if there's someone here today who has never experienced the love of God, that you'll consider it. And maybe you'll see it in your mother, what God's love is like. And that you'll make some decision about it. And I pray that if you have felt that you are too far away from God, to remember, God is not the one who moved. He wants to hold your hand and help you walk through the valley. He wants to help you when you feel alone by loving you. There's nothing that God wouldn't do for you. There's nothing to be afraid of. Because Jesus says, I'll go with you. I'll be with you even to the end of the age. Jesus extends his loving invitation to anyone who is here today. To learn and know that love. It's like a mother's love. So we're going to be singing an invitation to him. And it's an opportunity for you to accept him as Lord and Savior. An opportunity for you to be a part of this church, this family. If you need to make a decision, would you come? Stand and sing.